Hi everybody and welcome to Storytelling with Puck 2022. As always, we will start with the story.
Rage was her first emotion. How could he? This monster, this abomination, this tiny little man, must have thought he was God's gift. That space was hers. She had seen it first. Nobody could deny that. She had been waiting patiently for the little old lady to pack her final 8 bags of shopping into the boot of the car, only beeping once as a gesture, and this man was nowhere to be seen. She must have been there for more than 5 minutes because she had listened to the whole of Enchanted by Taylor Swift. It should be noted that Enchanted is by far her favourite song, but he didn't know that. How could he? As time passed by, her rage turned into a sadness. Why hadn't he even noticed her? What could possibly have been so important that he didn't think she was in any way remarkable? Surely it was obvious that she was tired that day and didn't want to have to walk very far. I mean, can you imagine walking through that massive car park from one end to the other in heels? Admittedly, his wife was also wearing heels, but that's not the point. They got there late. They drove straight into the spot and then took ages to sort themselves out. She didn't want to complain. She hated confrontation, so she just watched them. She watched as the wife walked around the car and moved him from one chair to another. His chair was almost identical to the one drawn into the space. He didn't have to wear heels. He was wheeled to the supermarket. How selfish could they possibly be? Entitlement took over when she returned home. Laptop out, fingers ready to go. She started on the tirades that would shame these tyrannical thieves. Their crimes would be known to the world, and she would be vindicated. But of course she wasn't. The vitriol came swiftly. They were clearly disabled. You really thought your heels were more important than their genuine needs? Bitch, you're not human. Evil, pure evil, were the responses. She wasn't evil. She didn't even really believe anything that she had said. She was angry, but not with them. Of course they should have the space. Yet waiting there, in her heels, lonely, betrayed, hurt, grief-stricken, reminded of her disabled child that had left her just the week before, she lashed out. Nobody ever left the space free for them. Nobody. Being that little bit closer to the store would have kept him alive. It's easy to judge, she thought. Welcome everybody to Storytelling with Puck 2022. It's wonderful to have all of you here. I had disabled the videos at the beginning, so if you would like to turn them back on again, if anyone who hasn't yet, feel free. It'll be lovely to see you all. Welcome to everyone who's watching live on YouTube as well. So, as this is the first Zoom of Storytelling with Puck 2022, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew what Storytelling with Puck is all about. I know some of you have joined in before, some of you were here last year, and some of you the previous couple of years. But for those of you who weren't here, and for everyone else who needs a bit of a recap because you're not quite as into it as Cyan and I are, then I'll go through a little bit about what we're going to do this week and what we're going to do today.
How are you doing?
Have you ever glanced across a room to see somebody's eyes widening before the rest of their face catches up? There could be many reasons for this, but Often it's because their head is stuck in a book and the words on the page have just put them into a state of shock. It's the power of reading a story that brings delight to us all. Yet, even without picking up a book, we are all often captured by the whirlwind of stories in music, film, art, poetry, and of course, gin down the pub. Many years ago, in a land not too far away from here, National Storytelling Week was started in the UK to celebrate stories told and to bring people together to share their tales. But beyond the spoken word, no matter whether it's an open mic event in a school or on stage, the idea behind National Storytelling Week was to give everyone the chance to share their stories using that spoken word. It's an idea that we fully support, and it's a truly powerful way to encourage confidence and relationship building skills in people of all ages. At Puck Creations, we're obsessed by this idea. We see the power a single story has in developing the fortunes and the growth of the clients that we work with. But we wanted to take that idea further. We wanted people from all over the world to take part, and we wanted it to go beyond the spoken word. Stories are told in so many ways, and over the past few years, we've had the privilege of seeing our friends and peers tell their stories with music, art, poetry, illustrations, photography, the written word, and more. So that's why today we are starting for 8 days, Storytelling with Puck 2022. All that you have to do is, as well as joining these lovely Zooms, which we'll have a few of them this week. But to share a story, all you need to do is add the hashtag Storytelling with Puck, and tag Puck Creations on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We will then search for your stories and we will curate every single one of them onto our LinkedIn page, and possibly, if we have time, onto our Facebook page as well, so that everybody can see each other's stories, and you can share what you think of each other's stories. You can give people a like, give people encouragement to keep on writing. Try not to be negative. This is all about encouraging people to build deeper connections. Now, we have heard a few people say in the past that they would love to join in, but they think that they don't have any stories.
Oh.
What would we say? It's completely understandable. And if you don't want to tell a story, you're also very, very welcome just to support everybody else's. But we know something that you guys might not. We know that each and every one of you does have a story to be told. And we know this because a story is really just a moment in time. You take that moment and you think about what led to it. What did you feel once that moment had passed? Write it down or put it in a video or draw it out, however you want to share it. And you have a story. You could, of course, expand on that story. You can play with it, but there's no need to. You can do as much or as little as you like. I promise you that at least some people, and often lots of people, will be really, really interested. So, once again, thank you to everyone watching, and thank you to everyone who's joined in and has come to speak with us today. Saya?
So the big question, is anyone brave enough or would like to share a story? And this is always the point where everyone was very quiet.
I think, Stefano, from the way you said all those things you said, you're supposed to have been a writer,
What do you mean by that? Sorry,
because
as in
you sounded like you are reading from a novel,
Oh, thank you.
From a land far away.
Maybe one day I'll get to that stage, Karina. Maybe one day.
I hope so, because it's really good. You're good with words.
Thank you. I appreciate that. For everyone who doesn't know Garima joined us last year of Storytelling with Puck and told some wonderful stories. And this year has started her own podcast and has done a lot of work with authors to promote their stories as well. And Garima and I have got to know each other a bit better. She's even been on our podcast episode as well. So there's a little story about stories for you to kick everything off. If you guys are starting to feel a bit braver, what we can do is we can give you a chance to think about whether or not you want to tell a story, and you can message us in the chat. And for now, Cyan doesn't get a choice; she has to be brave. So I'm asking Cyan to read the next one whilst you guys pluck up the courage.
So this is a story I shared last year. Day 45, somewhere near Suchitoto, El Salvador. Days like today are why I travel. We arrived at the bus stop at 6 a.m. sharp to catch the bus to a local village. 2 hours later, no buses had come. Some passers-by had insisted we were in the right place and told us to wait. The bus would be here soon. Others said no buses ever came this way. Having had our fair share of not so reliable bus journeys on this trip already, we thought, let's just walk. It can't be that far. A further 2 hours later, hot, thirsty, and hungry from the longer than expected walk, we arrived. Grateful to immediately spot a shop where we could buy some water. It was actually a window in someone's living room. We handed over our money for the plastic bags of water and gulped it down. Our main reason for making the journey to this place was to find Don Lino. His son, who we met the night before at the famous El Necio bar, insisted that we go meet Don Lino to learn about the history of the region. Apparently, his father never leaves the town, so we could be sure that he'd be at home. Having asked the shopkeeper where he lived, we found out that, of course, this day would prove to be the one and only day of the year he did leave the town to go to a party nearby. Disappointed to find no one home, we thought, let's at least explore the place since we've walked 2 hours to get here. While we were walking around, a man on a horse stopped to talk to us and spent 30 minutes telling us about the Civil War, how the town had been affected, and how they were now trying to recover. All the while casually letting our friend with no horse riding experience have a go on his steed. We thanked him for his story and continued to explore the village. Having gotten up so early to catch the non-existent bus, we'd had no time for breakfast, which we all now regretted. Thinking there must be somewhere we can buy some food, we continued to explore the place. Stumbling upon what we thought was a restaurant, we knocked on the gate outside. An elderly woman appeared from the side of the building and explained to us that it was actually her house, not a restaurant. Indeed, there was nowhere to buy food in the village. Seeing our disappointed faces, and after learning that we had hiked the whole way there, she brought us into her home, made us lunch, and despite our protests, wouldn't accept any money from us. Bellies full of cheese, beans, and pupusas, we thanked her and walked full circle back to the beginning of the village. Walking past the shop, the shopkeeper informed us that Don Lino was back home. We found his house, and he didn't seem at all surprised that his son had sent a group of total strangers to his house to hear his stories. For the rest of the afternoon, he told us about the efforts to rebuild the town following the war and massacres that took place. When we were about to leave, with a free ride on the back of a cattle truck arranged by Don Lino, his other son arrived at the house. He had heard from a neighbor that there were a group of gringos walking around looking for food. And since he had soup left over for lunch, he'd been trying to find us. The generosity of this country astounds me every day.
Nice.
Thank you so much. Obviously for me, I was with Cyan during that whole time, and so it brings back very specific memories and feelings. but what I hope is that it also maybe gave you guys some memories of some travels that you've had, and or potentially some people that you've met who really inspired you. Has that kind of triggered anything for anyone? Any memories at all that they've had of their travels?
Back in the days when we were allowed to do that.
Yeah, a long time ago.
If I can just talk about travel, guys, I've spent my life traveling, and Cyan, you say in the days when we could do that, and I've been decluttering the house, and I found my old passport with visas to countries that don't even exist, frankly, any longer. But I've had some outrageous experiences on buses. I remember one bus coming out of somewhere in northern India at 5:30 on a Friday night. And anybody who knows the exit routes of all cities on a Friday night, they are cluttered. But in India, the drivers take the view that, God willing, no matter what, I just put my foot to the floor and pull out. And further out and further out, and I was convinced I was going to die. I knew I could not survive the next 30 minutes. There's no way, because it's total mayhem. Anyway, we're driving along the road, and we're heading up somewhere towards an airport to take me to, must have been going to Nepal. One of these windy roads, and there's a bus lying on its side. And I said to my driver, when was the bus accident? He said, that was 4 days ago. I said, yes, were many people killed? Yep, he said, a great pile. Because, of course, not only was the bus full, but the roof was covered with people traveling, using the cheap seats on the roof. Our journey, wherever our journeys take us, I'm reading a book about Dubai, I'm reading about mountains, I'm reading about this and that. Our journeys are so important because it's the people we meet, the ideas, the new opportunities, everything that's been said already about poetry and song. So I'm on a journey this week, and I have been exploring music. And I was watching a wonderful video of James Blunt jumping off a cliff into the sea 164 feet below. And he sings, so I started with Dr. Hook, up on the mountain, up where the light breaks. That's where you'll find me, because up on the mountain, we can see into the distance and plan. And that took me to reflecting about 2 years of walking beside the lake and building complex salas. So in his song, he says, I'm screaming at the top of my voice. I'll not try to sing it. What I'd say to us, I'd be very interested this week in getting some songs from the group. And there's another one. I'd make the same mistake. I can't remember which song that was. It might have been the same one. I then started Googling, and other stuff comes up. Dream big. And another line, whatever it takes. And I found a singer called SIA. Nearly there.
Not me.
The song was called Unstoppable. I thought, wow, that's great, because I'm going into a meeting in a month's time to facilitate 15 big thinkers. And I found a band, I think they're called Imagine Dragons. And one of the lines of their song was, I love adrenaline in my veins. And I just thought, wow. And so here we are. I just arrived here. I was trying to watch if Nadal was going to win the Australian Open. I don't know. Does anybody know the result yet? It was 5-all in the fifth. Ooh. And here, Stefano, I have delivered a message. The songs are delivering a message. I love to feel adrenaline in my veins. And throughout the week, I've written down things like, what would happen if you could say whatever you want? How let the words fall out, somebody else said. tell the truth. If we told the truth, we'd know how many people were at the party. Be brave. and Sarah, was it Sarah Barre, Barelles? I can't even read my own writing. She said, say what you want to say. And so in my exploration of song this week, it's this exploration of what needs to be said now in a world that is in tatters, where we need people like us and people like lots of other people to fix it, whatever that means. That was a ramble, but that's what I've been doing this week. I thought I'd share it with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. We had in the last couple of years, we did have quite a lot of people submit songs and original compositions for Storytelling with Buck. So I'm hoping that we get some more this year, both originals, and we also had some people, I think, reimagine classic covers that definitely made me rethink or really listen to some of the lyrics that maybe I hadn't listened to before.
I do. I mean, I want to know what your favorite songs are, because if I come into my office first thing in the morning, I often put on David Bowie, his YouTube video, We Can Be Heroes Just for One Day. And that sort of gets me going. That just, okay, Alistair, get to the pending tray. What are your favorite songs? I think where do you turn to?
That's a big question. Favorite songs, I think, probably change most days. But going back onto what you guys have just talked about with the individual lyrics that you can get from certain songs, but also songs that fully tell a story. What I love is sometimes the lyrics in a Pearl Jam song or a Damien Rice song, which are intended to tell a full story, but also sometimes away from the lyrics, the actual music tells a story too. And so you can have a classical piece, you can have an Einaudi, which has no words at all, and we will all listen to slightly differently. So we will be listening to the flow of the music, and I might feel there was a particular Einaudi song which I first listened to about 2 years ago, which made me almost feel like I was at sea, as if I was on a boat at sea, and I could feel myself going through the eye of a storm, listening to this music. And that in itself was telling a story, but I imagine that somebody else listening to exactly the same piece would have a completely different story that they were listening to. So I think you're right to speak about the power of song, the individual lyrics, the stories that are told, but also the hidden depths of stories that are in music, I think really stand out as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's wonderful sometimes to be brought back to that kind of world. In terms of favorite songs, that's a difficult question.
Oh, and
does anybody have a definite yes? I know this is my favorite song. Does anybody out there can
or
just
top 10?
Well, I do have a song tattooed on my wrist. That's good. That's a good reminder. Given to Fly by Pearl Jam, which also tells a story. So it's
say it again.
Given to Fly. I don't know if I can hear.
Given to Fly. Who sings
for
that?
11 years. Is that too? Yeah. It is. It's a very interesting lyric of, like, I tattooed this, and it has helped me remind me of who I am when I was not being me. So that is a very important mark that I have on myself. And it's a story about a guy that rides on a wave, and then it has a lot of similarities with the myth from Plato, the cave myth of the guy that leaves the cave and people are only seeing the shadows, and he does that with surfing. So that's also good. And it's this thing of seeing that he can fly and that he can do something and that he can see the world in a way that other people are not seeing because they're too blind and they think he's the crazy one. So it makes us think of, so inspiring to be in this kind of environments that we allow ourselves to think and to imagine and to put our brains into a different mode that sometimes we are used to in our everyday lives. So this is special. Thank you for that.
I know that song, by the way, and it's an amazing song. I have to say, and you're right again in terms of the story that it tells. It's a powerful story. It's an eye opener. It, I think, brings us again into our own world. Sometimes I think that's what maybe stories do better than anything else. Is there's two elements. I think they help you understand yourself better, and then help you to connect with other people better. Because sometimes if you state a fact about something and you just say this is X and this is Y, it can be very quickly brushed away or argued with. But with a story, it's not necessarily aggressive. It's almost allowing you to listen to the idea behind it and take what you will from it. And then, as you alluded to and I was saying just then, be able to work out what it means to you, and then actually work out if that helps you to connect with the person who told the story, or if the person who originally wrote the story, etc. I think that's something that, not just in music, but in all of the different types of stories we have, really, really pushes the boundaries, shall we say. Does anybody else maybe have a story that they've been building up to that they want to let out to the world? Jackie, you have your hand up.
Well, only because nobody else is coming forward. So this is one when you said that, I thought, okay, well, I'll see if I can go find one. So let me see if I bring it up on my screen. This is sort of quite nostalgic, really, and it was written a couple of years ago, and I have to say it probably needs re-editing and rewriting. So, but it is what it is. So I will go for it, if that's okay.
Of course.
It's called Grandad. I don't know how old he was when this was taken, but the portrait looks official. I'd never seen him in a tie. He was gripping his neck, causing his skin to wrinkle and resemble the wattles of one of the turkeys he bought from work every Christmas. Looking into that familiar face, mouth turned downwards, but eyes smiling slyly, as if he'd done something naughty and was quite pleased about it, I was whisked back to my childhood. I was about 6 and dressed in some weird frilly dress, the kind with matching knickers. I was too old for such an outfit, but my mother was insistent. "You need to look nice for Nan and Pops," she said, and then spat on a hanky and wiped my face with it. I loved Nan and Pops, but the outfit just didn't sit well with the tomboy I was becoming. Anyway, their house was small and on an estate of other similar small houses somewhere in North London. It was the house I drew in pictures, pitch roof, window in each corner and a door in the middle. And oh yeah, and a chimney with smoke billowing out towards the sky. Inside the living room was dimly lit by one of the windows. I don't remember the colour of the walls, but I always remember Grandad, Pops, sat in his chair beside the fireplace, arms outstretched, inviting me to greet him. I'd jump on his lap, careful not to knock my bony knees against his, my frills invariably getting caught in the chain of his gold watch strung between the pockets of his waistcoat. He smelt of tobacco and pale ale, and his fulsome moustache tickled as I kissed his cheek. He always had one eye on the TV, which sat in the opposite corner. The small brown box was his pride and joy, even though it was difficult to make out the black and white figures throwing each other from one side of its tiny screen to the other. A 1-er, a 2-er, a 3-er. It was wrestling, Pops's favourite. He would turn the air blue, encouraging one or the other of the scantily clad men to beat the shit out of the other. Charming, I know. Mum would scold him, and Nan would roll her eyes. But it didn't stop him. He was the king. It was his castle, and he was the king of it, and I loved him. He was from a different era, a Victorian, an Edwardian, and an Elizabethan. He had lived a life most of which I knew nothing about. I knew he'd worked at Smithfield, the meat market. He'd started from school as a runner and apprentice butcher, and retired as a master long before I was born. He travelled into London most nights, Nan said, not returning home until lunchtime the next day. He'd been at the market the night the Germans dropped a V2 bomb on it, blowing it to smithereens. He'd been lucky. There were many deaths and many casualties, but the blast went around the huge pillar holding up the roof he was stood behind, and he was saved. The explosion travelled underground through the tunnels of the railway that took the mail from the market, killing many more. He didn't run away though. He was a fire watchman and so stayed to fight the blaze. He'd been a hero that night. Not that he ever mentioned it, but Nan was proud, I could tell. She'd recount the many stories as she ironed on the dining room table, the iron plugged precariously into the light socket above. She'd iron everything, tablecloths, socks, pants, towels. I learnt to iron on that table. Nan was larger than life, morbidly obese, I think you'd call it these days, but her stomach, which rested on her thighs like an apron, was testament to the 10 grueling labours she'd been through, my dad being the 9th of her huge brood. I looked down again at the oversized photograph of my granddad, mottled with dust and mould, sepiaed by time, and wondered why I'd never seen it before. He looked so smart, formidable, not at all resembling the mischievous old man I knew, who would happily wring the neck of one of the chickens residing in the back garden. I was pondering the reason for such a formal portrait when my mum came up behind me, breaking my daydream. Grumpy old curmudgeon, she said, looking over my shoulder. Mum, I said, offended. That's my pops you're talking about. He's a hero.
Isn't he just? Oh, it's amazing. I was thinking as you were reading that about all of the other stories that come from that incredible story. It was such a powerful story, and I can imagine that you can tell us actually, as well as the story you just told, because of who he was, you must have discovered so many other stories, and then from the numerous children, all of the stories that the numerous children have as well. It's beautiful. It was wonderful. Thank you for sharing it. But tell us a little bit more if you feel inclined.
Well, I mean, it was a project that came from a course that I'm doing on writing, and we were encouraged to free write. And I got this portrait down that wasn't actually of my granddad; it was of my husband's granddad, who was even older than my own, I think. And it was just such an evocative. I mean, it just kind of evoked this atmosphere of this kind of Victorian Edwardian, and it just made me realise and think about my own grandfather, who died when I was about 5. So I didn't know him that well, but I do have this clear vision of walking into the house and him sitting in the corner watching the wrestling and swearing and you know, and sitting on his lap. But yeah, as I say, there was a whole life that I never even knew about. But it was just that all of those images and those memories were evoked from that one photograph, even though it wasn't my granddad.
Has anybody else from listening to that story, has it kind of evoked any memories of their own childhood or their own family or anything like that at all?
Yeah, my maternal grandfather. He was a professor, you know, and in a college, and he passed away before I was born. So I only got to see his pictures, and my maternal grandmother used to talk about him, how he was like always wanting to do the right thing and teaching other people to do the right thing in life, you know. So I got to learn all those things through my grandmother and my mother, you know. So Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to meet him. Otherwise, I would have learned something more from him. But from the way my mother and grandmother used to talk about him, he was a very cheerful personality. When he needed to be strict with students, he used to be strict. But at home with the family, he was always jovial and helping out and guiding everyone. So when I used to see his pictures, I used to wish that he was alive. So
This is the power of stories, because you can also feel like you got to know him through the stories of other people. And I think that's that's the great thing about the stories that are passed down through the generations. And I think as Jackie was speaking, it reminded me a lot of my grandparents, and a bit of how you, especially as a child, you just see them maybe as grandparents, and typically, depending on what age they are, as, oh, they're the retired people who have this nice, quiet way of life. And it's only when you maybe become an adult that you realize that they had an entirely different life before you came along. And things that maybe you take for granted. So my granny on my mother's side rode motorbikes and was the co-driver in rallies and did all sorts of things that were completely very unusual for a woman of her generation. But to me, it was completely normal, because those photographs were just in her house, and I took it for granted that, did everybody's granny not ride a motorbike? And now I really regret that I didn't ask her much more about all of these things that she did. So it's funny how as a child you just take all of these things for granted.
Yeah. I mean, I think as well, you don't realize that just going back those couple of generations, how life changes so much, to go back to the beginning of the century when my granddad was born, to go through that, to go through having Victoria on the throne, to Edward, to Elizabeth. It's that amount of time that passes and how life changes in that time. And as you say, we completely take it for granted that they are just there, and we don't even look at them as having any other kind of life apart from us.
You make me think of my mother, who lived in the countryside, and she went to church in a pony and trap, and the pony could tell the time. And if the vicar went on a bit, the horse would look at its watch and say, "Come on, boys, it's time to go home for lunchtime. Hey." And the ponies tied to the rail outside the church in the countryside would start to get restless, and occasionally would kick out of the traces, to kick themselves out of the traces. But what you make me think of is it was a different time before the internet, and the internet was Sunday afternoons when people walked from all the farms down to the crossroads and met and had a long chat and exchanged what had been happening for the last 7 days. And that was the Twitter sphere, the chat, because there weren't even telephones back then. I mean, well, not most people did not have one. Yeah. And so in terms of memory, what you're saying there, Jackie, is exactly that. It's taking me back to a life I didn't know, but my parents and grandparents talked about. And Garima, you say your grandfather was always very cheerful. And oddly,
he had a simple life,
Oh, well, absolutely. And what they're saying,
he did not even have a bicycle or anything. He used to walk to the market, and after retirement, he built his own house. Everything was nearby, neighbors and everything. So my grandparents had a, completely simple life, unlike nowadays, the internet and, so many things complicate our life,
things that can go wrong when you run out of battery. And this week in the press and various writings, they've been talking about 2022 the need for humor, which is first, I mean, apart from everything else, what this session does is it recharges my batteries. But because every Zoom call now you start the agenda, there is nowhere for humor. And yet, when we all go back to the offices, they are saying that the humor by the coffee machine, as you come in, and in the morning at the water cooler, and just this interaction of face-to-face casual repartee lifts us and is part of life, as opposed to got to go. It's 11:59. I've got a Zoom call starting in 1 minute. So humor. And sorry, it was it was your word, cheerful, that took me to humor, and being, reasons to be cheerful. Another song. 1, 2, 3. Pop creations, done all of that. You can just hear a new verse being written for that, Stefano.
I await the full. I await the full version from you, Alistair, by the end of the week.
Orchestrations. Okay, we'll start on that. We need a verse from everybody, though.
There is that as well. That generation, my granddad's generation, going through 2 world wars. I mean, literally living through both of those world wars. But they were always cheerful. I can remember on my mother's side, my grandparents on my mother's side were Irish. And just the laughter of, on a Sunday afternoon, just to go and sit with the family, recounting stories and just laughing. And it was the same with my dad's family. It was a big family. We were always out playing, and, cousins, and, there was this huge sense of the family as community as well. And even though they'd been through all of that adversity, and, there wasn't a lot of money around, they didn't have any of the kind of mod cons that we have now, but there was always that humor.
I think sometimes that kind of adversity is almost the ammo for humor, isn't it? It's when things are going so badly wrong, sometimes the only way out is to laugh. And I know some people don't take it as well to it as others. But when my dad passed away a few years ago, me and my siblings, we all have a very strong gallows humor. So even though it was extremely sad for all of us, we were still making jokes, and I won't go into all of them now because some people might find them a bit too much, but still making jokes about the things that happened just before he passed away, and silly things about him, and silly stories about the way that he used to come up with. He would forget things quite a lot in his later ages, and so he would tell the same stories over and over again, and he would be sure to remind us that he had a driving license, but not just one. He had a driving license. He had a forklift driving license. He had a lorry license. And then he would tell us stories about all of the places he had been to. And funnily, most of them were true, but occasionally there'd be a story where we would definitely doubt whether or not it was him or he had seen something somewhere else and then put himself into that situation. Not on purpose, he wasn't lying, but he had gathered information, and because his memory was fading, he couldn't remember if he had done something or if somebody else had done something. So he just put himself into the story. And so we'll get the same story told over and over again, but quite often with just a slight nuance, a slight difference, which wasn't quite the same thing. But that's then why, when he did pass away, we could have the gallows humor. We would bring up some of those things, and again, no, I'm not going to say that joke. But yeah, we'll talk about jokes to do with the driving license and his passing away. That's all I'll say. Yeah, I think adversity can sometimes be the ammo, can't it, for humor and for stories as well. Actually.
Yeah. When my husband died 4 years ago, which was a bit of a shock and obviously very sad. But my husband was always known for his jokes, and so at the wake afterwards, I brought along a huge joke jar that everybody, and some Post-it notes, and everyone was encouraged to write down their favourite joke and put it in the jar. which I now have as a, you know, as a sort of a memento, and everybody knew him for his jokes. So yeah.
That's really beautiful, Jackie.
That's a great,
Really
that's fabulous thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
Wow.
like to share something on this topic on the humor. You know, I read a lot of novels, fiction novels, and of course, there are some authors who write on romance genre, you know, paranormal, so many different genres. So, and there are some that are really humorous that you will be thinking that from where the person got the idea, you know. So I just want to give an example. There's one series, paranormal series, romance. So it's about a group of dragons. They are all siblings. They were exiled from their homeland and they came to Earth to live like ordinary human beings. So this is from the second book in the series. The sibling, who is the dragon, he works as a medical doctor in Chicago. Now he falls in love with a vampire, and the vampire, she's actually not completely vampire, she's half human, half vampire. So because of that, one of the other full vampire, he's against her. So when he gets to know that she's having an affair with this dragon, he tricks the dragon into kidnapping him. So what he does is that he goes to the dragon and tells him that if you come with me, I will not harm one of your patient, you know. So the dragon asks him that, how do I know you will not harm my patient? So the vampire says, I swear on my life. Then the dragon says, you're a vampire, you are dead. And then the vampire just ignores that, his comment, and then he says, just get in the car. You know, sometimes I'll be thinking that how the writers, how they are able to, you know, write things that are not only humorous, but also there is some meaning to it, you know. The novels are not just about reading the story, passing the time, but, you know, sometimes you will feel that there is some deep meaning that we cannot express, you know.
You've actually led me onto something there with that story, Kariba. It's a brilliant story, by the way, really funny. But you've led me, you've reminded me that on Wednesday, we're doing something for the first time that's a little bit different to any of the other Zoom calls that we've had for Storytelling with Pucks in the past. And it is a flash fiction event. This isn't really hosted by us. It's a friend of ours called Darren. And he has a company called Ipso Dexo. And he can explain exactly how the structure is going to work. But the idea behind it is that you come on the day and anyone who turns up will have the opportunity to get together with a couple of other people on the call and create their own piece of fiction within just a very, very, very short 15-minute period of time. So the idea behind that is to get an understanding of how some of these brilliant authors do come up with their concepts, do come up with the power of being able to write about a dragon, or, you know, the Harry Potter kind of style wizards and witches, or Lord of the Rings, or whatever it is. That seems so far-fetched, but actually can have a deep meaning. So the genre will be picked by the card, the elements of the story will be picked by the card, but then you will have to put those elements together with a genre to make up your own story. If you would like to join that, we'll put all the information out there, obviously, on the event and on the Puck page, but it's on Wednesday, and I can't remember the time, at 2 p.m. in the UK, on Wednesday at 2 p.m. in the UK. And it's nice for me because I'm kind of sitting back and not doing very much, but I'm also just really, really looking forward to taking part because I think it's going to be so much fun. So I hope that you guys can come, and anybody who's watching this via YouTube as well, I hope you can join in with that one. That won't be pushed out live, so you'll have to actually turn up to the Zoom if you would like to join in with that bit of creativity. Thank you, Sam. So does who here is interested more in kind of real life stories, and who prefers a bit of fiction, or are you all loving a bit of both?
I seem to go towards real life stories more, I have to say. I'm quite interested in people, I think. And, you know, not that obviously novels don't deal with people, but I do like to, I like to read life writing is kind of what I like.
Non-fiction.
Yeah, non-fiction. That's the word, thank you.
We've had a couple of voices in the chat. Sorry, go on.
No, just I like a blend.
Is there a particular time, Alistair, that maybe a piece of fiction will appeal to you more than a piece of non-fiction, and vice versa?
Ah, yes. I mean, do you mean in the course of the day?
Yeah, or the course of the day, or a week, or a year. Like it maybe actually the course of your feelings. So if you're in a particular mood, you might want to read something. Maybe you feel the need to be inspired, and there's a I don't know, an autobiography that you think will inspire you, or the complete opposite.
Well, I tell you, I have been thinking differently over the last 2 years, in that because I have time to think differently, if you like. I have time to slow down, and therefore I'm reading in a different way. So I do spend the mornings, the early morning, it's coffee and yesterday's newspaper, and that sort of stuff. Whereas after lunch, if it's not a nap, and it's rarely a nap, it's usually a bit of fiction, just for escapism. I walk with a guy, and he and I share our libraries together. So I give him stuff I think he might like. Likewise, one of my sons buys me seriously interesting stuff I wouldn't buy if I was wandering around Waterstones. And of course, to do that is such a joy, because Amazon already knows what I buy, so just suggests the following 10. Whereas in Waterstones, you've got 10 freaky people putting on display their stuff, and you go, ooh, well, I might read that. And do. So, yeah, I'm reading differently, going back into 3 or 4 serious books about life and thinking and thought leadership and stuff. I mean, funnily enough, I'm reading this at the minute, The Power of Moments. You'll know it, and it's by Chip and Dan Heath, who wrote their first Orange book. It's called something I don't. You all know it. Stanford. What's it called?
Made to Stick.
Made to Stick. Well, Made to Stick. That's great, and this is almost a series of case studies that they've gone on to discover. Why does one hospital in the United States outperform all the others? And it's interesting that if the NHS, banking, education, life, armies, the world is in tatters of some sort, how do we fix the NHS is one of the many parallel questions. And the Heath boys say, you cannot, happy patients recover faster. You cannot have happy patients without happy staff. The hospitals that have happy staff have better results. I'm very interested in all of that space, and I know some of you are. So any comments over this week? Always good just to cross-pollinate and collaborate on ideas for that. So I'm very serious, but I use the little time after lunch to go off on some sort of a John le Carré spy thriller back in time.
Do you ever feel like the spy thrillers bring you back to real life? in a sense. So you read something fictional, and actually it really helps then for you to think creatively about a particular situation, about how to make people happy in hospital, for example.
Well, I've been running James Bond themed think tanks for master's students for a long time. And I just take, oddly, that has evolved. It used to be James Bond. We all dressed up in like Q or something, or trying not to be in a tuxedo. James Bond gets thrown into unbelievably difficult situations, and we know he's going to find his way out. Like all of us, no matter what, we all have stuff going on in our lives. And that has sort of evolved into superheroes, because, the James Bond, but you look at the whole raft of superheroes and heroines, they get thrown into difficult situations. And so the spy thrillers, and many of those are based on, French resistance and world wars and, all of that stuff that the spy called Sonia I got for Christmas. This ability to take risk, to dare, to go into situations, hoping to find a way out, not knowing the answer. I think that sort of parallels with business in many ways, whether it's a startup or a multi-billion-dollar company, they have the same problems. So I do find the spy is often saying, what will I do next? So maybe there's some sort of joining up there. What do I do next? And then ducking and diving.
Can I just come in on that, because you've made me think of what I do in some of my coaching with teams and companies. From a drama point of view, I'm from a drama background, is I will put them in situations where I get them to improvise being an ordinary person in an extraordinary situation. And I encourage them to be their own superheroes. And I think that's something that's really, really important, because we all go through that. In some part of our life, we go through that. But again, it's that adversity thing, isn't it? It's putting yourself into that situation. And what would Superman do in that situation? What would, name whichever hero, James Bond, whatever. How would they deal with that? But I think certainly within novels and fiction, that hero's journey, that Star Wars story, whatever it might be, has got all of those elements of that hero's journey, working as a team, all of those. And you can kind of really reflect that back to not just life, but also business.
We'd all like to be heroes and be heroic, and yet we all think that we're not.
No, but I think we all are. I think we all are.
And yet, that's where David Bowie, we can be heroes, or everybody demands their 15 minutes of fame. But there are times when we have to stand up for what is right, just, moral, the thing to do, whatever that is. And those opportunities come along rarely. And yet, and I'm sorry to bring it back to business, in business, I like to do business with trustworthy, authentic companies that I can rely on, who will turn up on time, who will deliver, and not just mess me around with junk from somewhere, junky, delivered badly and late.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't we all rather be? I'm now singing I'm part of the in crowd in my mind. I'm in with the in crowd and I go with the in crowd. We want to have purpose in our lives. Not all the time. I mean, that'll be tiring. but now and again, hey, you want to just do something, because when we are purposeful, I hope it gives other people joy. It might give us joy. And I mean, joy and humor maybe go together. And I don't know. It just, life is complicated. But being a hero, being decisive, and the world needs leadership at every level today.
Yeah, and those leaders need to have humility, humor, joy. They need to have all those things too. Yeah. David Bowie is my hero, I have to say. What would David Bowie do?
What would David Bowie do? Yeah.
I recently wrote an article on this, and I wrote that all these characters from the comics that are shown in the movies as superheroes, that they have superpowers, super strength, they can fly, whatever. So, but I wrote, what the article was about is that in real life also there are heroes, that we like ignore, all these professionals like the doctors, the people in the military or law enforcement who help us in their own various professions. And not only these people, even our own parents are our heroes, because right from the beginning, when we are born, our parents take care of us, they nurture us, they tolerate us despite our, misbehavior, or when we raise hell and all that stuff. So, my point of view is that even us human beings, we are not superheroes, we don't have powers, but we have, like as you mentioned, we have a purpose in life. We have a way of dealing with situations, of handling other people, how to solve problems, whether it is personal problem or professional. So everyone is a hero on his own. So that was what my article was about.
Yeah, absolutely right.
It's an important point, Grima. I think actually quite often I'm a little bit obsessed with watching superhero shows and movies. And
Even me. I like the Marvel, superheroes more than the DC ones.
we won't get into that. We might get sued. But no. What I find quite often within those shows actually is they recently anyway, and I think it's meant to have been the message going back from when they first started. Quite often talk about the idea that even those heroes, even the Supermans, even the Batmans, the Arrows, whoever it is. I should do a Marvel one, just the Iron Man. There you go. Just to even out a bit. But what makes them heroic isn't being able to fly. It isn't being able to shoot an arrow further than anyone else, being able to have super strength, whatever it is. What makes them heroic is the ability to say this situation is difficult and it's one of the biggest challenges I've ever had, and I'm going to stand up to it and I'm going to face it head on. And I think when you look at what they are trying to portray quite often as actually the strengths that they have that are physical, that we can all see, that sometimes we look at as the reason that they are heroic, are not actually what makes them heroic. You realize that you can have your own kind of internal bit of heroism. And I think sometimes people get put off by certain words as well as, I don't want to be a hero, I don't want to have to look after everyone else. But it's not necessarily about that. It's about, I think, as Alistair mentioned earlier, the fact that you do what you think is right and that you have that integrity and that you have that ability to be able to say, actually, I'm going to stand by my values here. I'm going to do what I believe in. And so, yeah, I think everyone's made some brilliant, brilliant points. I didn't know we were going to get into superhero stories today, but some brilliant points around that kind of idea of heroism. I think we're coming close towards the final end of today's chat. But before we do, does anyone have any more stories they'd like to share to bring us towards that end nicely? Anything that they feel like they would like to put out there into the world?
I can read something, maybe.
Sure.
Okay. It's something I wrote 4 years ago. Let's see how this goes. It's called Fading In. Years ago, I read an article about transitions that take place in our everyday lives and their role in getting our minds from one thing to the next. Although the article seems to have vanished from the internet, I recall learning that our experiences can be crafted in a way that creates these transitions between one state and the next, between A and B. These states, although frequently unnoticeable, are incredibly useful and often define how we navigate our lives. Transitions are underrated. Think about it. When you watch a movie in the theater, when we used to go to the theater, and hopefully we'll be able to do that soon, after all the hustle to get there, what happens first? The fading of the lights and music, then the ads, then the trailers, then the opening credits. Only after all of these stages, you get to watch the actual movie. Once the movie ends, you don't stand up and flee the room. You can sit and watch the questionably fun closing credits while the lights are slowly dimmed back on. Can you recall watching a movie that touched you so deeply that got you staring at the screen for minutes before you could even stand up and leave? What this does is it builds your presence. It builds momentum in your mind and shifts your full attention to where it needs to be. It gives you time to switch from whatever was happening before that experience. At the end, it gives you time to recover before you go back to life. Now, cut to our current busy FOMO lives. The devices we use seek speed and seamless connections. You don't have to wait for your phone to turn on every time you need to use it. You don't need to go to an agenda to check someone's number to call them. We want to kill transitions for the sake of speed, and we're wrong on doing that. We want to play a movie in the daylight on our TVs, and we want to play it 30 seconds after coming home from work. We want our email message to arrive instantly. We want to be responded instantly. How often do you stay at the table after you finish eating? Or even, do you eat at a proper table doing nothing else but eat and maybe talk to someone? Think about what happened between your previous activity and this very moment. Chances are it looks like this. You were doing something else, doing some other thing, doing and doing and doing. Our experiences in life, maybe at work, study, travel, relationships, are moving towards erasing or at least ignoring these transitions. I invite you to think about the experiences you had in the past or recently where you can identify this transition between being here and there. For instance, when I have an appointment, I like to arrive at least 20 minutes early. And sometimes I show up to people's house early as well, right, Stefan? I did that last night. Yeah. I never realized why until now, but it has always proved to be powerful in helping to get my mind not to be released from what was going on before the appointment. As a result, I always feel a lot more present. And these 20 extra minutes are often the best part of my day. When was the last time that you commuted without distracting yourself from the fact that you were commuting somewhere? That you simply paid attention to that moment between leaving home and sitting on your desk or seeing someone? We are in a continuum of stimuli and reaction and action and scrolling and responding. We believe our lives should be a progression of boxes checked and a scavenger hunt where you finish one thing and get another one done right away. I say don't. I say let's take a break from that. Don't try to remove or numb the transitions in your day. It may be more productive to listen to a podcast or an audiobook in your commute, but just for once, try to just be there. If it takes you 40 minutes to get somewhere, then give your mind 40 minutes to adapt from home to work or socializing mode. The beauty of the transition is in the small things. The wait for the water in the shower to get warm before we step into it. The end of a song and the beginning of another one. The minutes before the waiter brings you dinner, the 15-minute break before your next meeting, the hours before the concert of your favorite band. Don't try to fill that with other stuff, because if you pay attention, the magic of the transition is also in the big things, and nature relentlessly shows us that. Look at a sunrise or a sunset and feel the day beginning or ending. Look at the flowers blooming. Look at how your surroundings change because it's winter or summer or spring or autumn. Observe how long it takes for snow to build up and to melt down. Every form of life, including our own, is in constant transition. Everything is in transition anyway, so why not enjoy it? Sometimes it might seem like your life has been a bunch of consecutive events, but pay attention. Was it really, or were you just not paying attention? Have you ever spent a day between jobs, between projects, between schools, between relationships? And if you did you appreciate that very moment, or were you just wishing for the next thing? We get anxious for the next step. We underestimate the power of those transitions moments in making us so much more prepared for what's to come, and especially more present to it. And this is from 4 years ago, so now I am fading to something else. I'm not there yet, so don't ask me where I'm going because I don't know. Each time I overcome the anxiety of the next destination, I enjoy the heck out of a journey. I am allowing myself to navigate into wherever direction it makes sense. You don't see that many people speaking from these places. You normally see who's already on the other side, who already found what they were looking for, or at least wants us to believe that. Or people who go through that while traveling through beautiful places, being done that, but not from the monotony of their own gray desk. It can be awfully boring sometimes, deadly scary at others. It is okay because I know the light will shine beyond the tunnel as soon as I get there. And after all that light, there will be another tunnel and another light and another tunnel, all the way until the end. I understand that it is my turn to sit back, never mind what happened before, and shift my attention to the movie that's about to start at any minute, because that's just how it goes for everyone. And in the meantime, I can sit back on my chair and enjoy the popcorn.
Wow.
Hey, terrific.
Thank you.
Absolutely, bro. No, thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Cara.
Yeah. That made me
So,
think of so many
what-
transitions. Zoom, you know, the actors in the theatre when I was actually dressing and doing costume in theatre, actually, the actors always have a half. So there's a half-hour call before they step on stage, and that half an hour is not just to get into their costumes, but just to get to transition from life into the story that they're about to tell. So yeah, and I love train journeys just for that very fact that you just get that time to transition. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, super.
They did a perfect way to, I think, also gain creativity sometimes, those moments of transition, those moments of just staring out the window, those moments of going for a walk, those moments of nothingness are often the moments that actually spark something which you can then put out into the world, or just keep to yourself if that is what you prefer, but it's something that could make you feel different. It was poetic the way you told that, Carol. Thank you. Now, talking of poetry, actually, before we get there, let's talk about what's going to come up for the rest of the week in terms of Zooms. On Tuesday at 7:30 p.m, everything I talk about here is going to be UK time. So please transition to your own time zones. Tuesday at 7:30 p.m, we will have another Zoom call where we will just be sharing stories, hopefully some of the stories that are going to be submitted between the rest of today, tomorrow and Tuesday. On Wednesday, we have the Flash Fiction workshop, which we spoke about a little earlier on. On Friday, we'll have another set of stories. Oh, sorry, I said Wednesdays at 2 p.m. On Friday at 4 p.m, we will have another set of stories for the Friday Fables. And then finally on Sunday, it will be sad because it will be the final Zoom of the week, and it will be the chance that we get to say goodbye and review all of the stories that have come up during the week. But that will be at 6 p.m. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing stories, for just kind of discussing life. I hope it has done what it was intended in terms of helping us all to connect a little bit deeper, and even for the people who are just watching today, to get a better understanding of what this is all about too, and to maybe feel confident enough to share their stories throughout the week. We will end with a story in the form of poetry. But before we do, does anybody have anything they want to add, or any questions they want to ask? Anything that they don't know about the week ahead that they would like to know, or they think is important?
Just a quick one. I have a friend who might be writing a story, and they asked me what sort of length, what's too long, what's too short, what's about right.
There are no rules. How long is a piece of string?
Okay.
As long as you need to tell your story.
If it is a full novel, you might get a few less people reading it right away, but
Share some snippets.
yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not allowed. It's yeah.
I will pass that on.
Perfect. Any other questions at all about the week?
Okay, then thank you all for joining. Very much looking forward to hearing all your stories, and we will, as always, finish with the story.
Seldom do you see tales roaming free. Obscure they are in style, renowned for their guile. Yield! Time is not passing. Elves, they are chanting. Leprechauns are demanding. Lions don't exist. Innocuous they're seeming, never to be dreaming. Gore returns, we're screaming. Written words that can't be missed. Inhale, slowly. It's time to take a break. Thoughtless rhymes are no match for the crimes Hercule has on his plate. Perhaps it's not lost. Ugliness, cured by kindness, praise one another. Extracting creations hurts like no other. This is not poetry. It's a story with rhythm. You and your magic are going to make this week happen. Thank you.